Welcome to WP-Tonic episode 187. Today we've got the immense pleasure of having as a guest Dusty Davidson, the CEO and founder of Flywheel, one of the great managed WordPress hosts in this space. But before we get into today's interview, I want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Liquid Web. And Liquid Web has been known for years as a managed hosting company with tons of options. But recently, they've also designed a managed WordPress offering that's perfect for mission-critical sites. So if your site absolutely positively has to stay up and you're looking for improved performance, maximized uptime, and incredible support, Liquid Web is the hosting partner that you've been looking for. One thing that's really cool about Liquid Web is every managed WordPress customer has iThemes Sync already integrated into their management portal. What does this mean for you? It means you can update several sites with a single touch of a button. Another cool thing that Liquid Web is introducing is a preview screenshot. When you go to update your plugins, you can actually see what your site's going to look like. So that way you know that your site is not going to break. So if all that sounds great to you and you want to sign up today, you can use the discount code WP-Tonic33 and you'll get a 33% discount off your bill for the next 6 months. Visit liquidweb.com/WordPress to get started and use that discount code WP-Tonic33. And with that, I want to introduce our guest, Dusty Davidson. Tell us a little bit about yourself, those who don't know you.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Dusty Davidson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Flywheel. We're a managed WordPress host, really focused on building a platform and solutions for designers and agencies, and really anybody who builds sites for clients. We've been around about 4.5 years now, grown pretty quickly, and excited to be here and talk about anything and everything WordPress or business or Flywheel.
Great. And I also want to introduce my co-host, Jonathan Denwood. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, hi there, folks. I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're a WordPress support maintenance company with strong roots in the WordPress community. Try us and we'll become your trusted partner, won't we, John?
We will certainly try. My name is John Locke. My business is Lockdown Design, and what I provide is custom WordPress development and SEO for blue-collar businesses that are looking to grow or medium-sized businesses that need an outside hand. And this way, they can get a handle on, their business again. So jumping right into the interview, one thing I always like to ask people, Dusty, is, how do you get started? You're out there in the Silicon Prairie. How did you meet your co-founders? How did Flywheel get off the ground?
Yeah, so our story starts, 9 or 10 years ago at my first software company. We were a consulting firm. We built software applications and ultimately a lot of websites for people, and would end up putting them on WordPress. This was very early days of WordPress, and hired both of my now co-founders at that first company. One of them as an intern. So I always tell our interns that, you work long enough and hard enough that maybe you can rise to the top. But we worked together for many years and it went on our separate ways. And I always say got the band back together to start Flywheel, really around this idea of building the hosting company that we would have loved to use. We were scratching our own itch in a way, and wanted to build not only sort of a robust hosting platform that I think matched the quality of design and development work that we were doing, because lots of times we would charge clients $20,000 to build a site for them and then put it on $2 a month hosting, and something about that felt really weird, not just because of the price, but because of the quality of product that we were putting out sort of matched with hosting that would inevitably get hacked or get or perform slowly. And we thought that was, we didn't think that was quite right. And on top of that, there, at the time, and I think carrying through even to today, most hosting is sold to technical people. And yet there's sort of this convergence of the world of designers and developers, facilitated in lots of ways by WordPress, whereby by very creative sort of non-technical folks are able to build really great businesses as freelancers or agencies And all of them have hosting needs, but they don't want to deal with the kind of technical mumbo jumbo that goes into it. And we wanted to build a company that resonated with them, and in a sense, sell to people like us. It's again, kind of back to this idea of like, what's the hosting company we would have wanted to buy from? And so both from the brand perspective and the product perspective and the platform perspective, we really set out to kind of fill that place in the market.
No, definitely. And I agree with you. Like when you look back to 5 years ago, a lot of the hosting wasn't where it is now. And I think nowadays we kind of take it for granted that we have all these options. But if you go back 5 or even 10 years ago, I mean, a lot of the hosting was really terrible especially for something like WordPress. So, when you guys set out to establish that, did you have what were you looking at as far as the gaps in the market that you wanted to fill with your specific technical offerings?
Yeah, I think there's two major areas where we set out to fill and where even to today we continue to. And one is this belief that hosting should just work, right? That there's a I think that there was a status quo around needing to tinker and kind of like futz with memory settings or with configuration files or with all of these sorts of things, or even install plugins in order to solve rudimentary problems like backups or security. And our contention at the beginning is, and till today, is that it should just work, right? You should just be able to install WordPress or frankly just create a site and not have to worry about this entire sort of category of things that are solvable problems that in effect allow the designer or the developer to focus on what they do best, and that's core to who we are at Flywheel. So that was one, and the other was that we could build software that enhanced the workflow of people who build sites for clients, to make their lives easier, not only from the hosting perspective, but from the perspective of how they build sites and interact with their clients. And in that regard, think of ourselves oftentimes as a software company that happens to host websites, whereas certainly 5 years ago, all of the hosting providers in the world were just sort of like providing servers and providing space for it, and that was the offering. And we really came in, I think, and said, wait a minute, if we look at the world through the eyes of the designer or the person building sites for clients, what problems can we solve? And when you talk to people about those things, they're not asking for them because they're comfortable with the processes that they've built. But when you come with them and say, wait a minute, you don't have to share passwords with other designers and developers in order to grant them permission to help you collaborate on the site. They're like, oh, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Or I was always give the example that for our clients, we had a Google Doc with just 100 usernames and passwords in it of all of their hosting setups, and we would log in and we would tinker and do this stuff on their sites. And if you actually step back and say, hey, wait a minute, that seems not right, you can build really cool software. And I think that's the second big piece of the Flywheel story that I think ultimately set us apart and continues to, in with regards to our perspective on how we approach the problem of hosting in a kind of in a software and workflow way.
And something you addressed right there that I think is really critical, and you're speaking about like the way that maybe some places do is like sharing a big sheet of passwords. It's like incredibly scary when you step back and think about that for just 2 seconds. But one thing that I really appreciate about Flywheel, because I mean I have my main site on Flywheel. I'm a customer, have been for a few years, and one thing that's really cool is, say if I have a client and I set them up with like their site, they can authorize me to, also like work on it. And when I log into my dashboard, it's just right there, and it doesn't count against my, 10 in my professional pack. I think that's a really great idea. Was that feature put in mind specifically to solve some of these problems from the consultant and like agency point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the, if you look at those types of workflow features, I mean, they seem kind of trivial in a way, right? Like, it's like, oh, you should be able to should just show up in your dashboard. But the reality is it wasn't the case. Like, certainly 5 years ago, it just wasn't happening. Like, if you were creating sites for clients, the number of times when we did this, when we were building sites for clients, where I would ask a client for their credit card number and their username and password, so I could log in and buy the hosting for them and then get it all set up. And because I didn't want to be on the hook for it, in that regard, in my account, the number of times that happened was crazy. And I think in the early days of Flywheel, we talked to hundreds of designers like us, and we would just have these conversations, and they would say, yeah, that seems weird. Like, that would be great if you could solve those problems. And so those are the types of things, certainly in the early days, that we that both set us apart, but also I think solved real problems for designers and agencies.
No, definitely. And that's one of the things where I think you guys are actually a pioneer, is you make it easy for, the consultancy, the agency can go ahead and set up a site, and then they can like hand off the payment to the customer, and it is not like a big thing like you described where you're having to read the credit card number over the phone. And I think that right there is one of the best features actually of Flywheel. And like I said, I think you guys broke a lot of ground. One thing that I want to ask you is, when you first launched, the landscape was a little bit different than it is now. And there's a lot of companies like EIG companies that were well established. I think WP Engine was still kind of new. How did you guys go out and get your first customers? Did you go to people in the Omaha area? I know that that's actually kind of a tech hub and kind of like a well-guarded secret, but in that area, there is like a lot of tech activity. Did you guys start there, or did you kind of reach out through the WordPress community? How did you guys get your initial traction and momentum?
Yeah, so we certainly did. We have great inroads here locally. We've been long time members of the design and agency and developer communities here. So that was certainly a starting place, although not really interesting to us, because that's not scalable, right? Like, we can't always just walk down to our friend's, little studio and say, hey, do you want to buy from us? And so that was very early on for that part of it. But beyond that, I mean, we look at the world and said, like, we're going to market to designers. And because of our sort of like deeply held belief that the designers are the ones who are building the sites for their clients, and ultimately are responsible for building the majority of sites in the world. But we get somebody to market to. We get somebody to actually sell to and to create messaging for, right? It seems like a niche, designers, but it's a niche of people who build sites for other people, which is great. And so we did, in the early days, very stupid kind of, guerrilla things. The example that I had that I always use is that our original splash page was just one page that described what we did. We didn't even have a platform. There was nothing behind it. And it was just an email capture. And but it said, beautiful WordPress hosting built for designers, and it was a beautiful website. And so we submitted that to all these design contests, and it so it would end up on these design contests as one of the featured sort of beautiful sites, where it would say beautiful WordPress hosting built for designers, and all these designers who are looking at the contest because they want to see what other designers are building. See our site, and they click through it, and then they enter their email address. And we collected tens of thousands of email addresses just based off of these design contests. And that was our core audience. And what we would do then is we'd look through that list of people who signed up their email address, and we'd find somebody who had a sort of a great sounding domain name, right? Like, that sounded like they were a freelancer or a little agency. And we would just email them and say, like, hey, thanks for your interest. I'm the co-founder, and we don't really have anything to sell you, but we'd love to talk to you about what we're building. And 9 times out of 10, they'd say yes, and we would just pick up the phone and we'd call them. And my partner Rick and I spent the first long time of Flywheel just talking to customers and potential customers and learning about them and kind of corroborating what our ideas were. And so that's it. And once we then had something to sell them, we could, as part of that process, have this conversation and be like, oh, well, what if we just moved your sites for you? And, we started doing site migrations and, it just kind of built on itself. But, we didn't, because we had this niche of designers, we could literally just, it's somebody to specifically market to. And I think that was a big piece of it. And the other piece was just pure hustle on our part of just doing the hard work and picking up the phone and calling people.
I really appreciate, 2 things about that. You identified a niche, graphic designers, visual designers, and then you made a targeted thing. You built a beautiful splash page, put it on places like where they would see it, like the CSS Design Award type of sites, and then you collected emails, and then you actually did the grinding and, do something that very few technical people will do, and that's pick up the phone and actually reach out to people and get inside their mind that like, hey, now we're on your radar. We're not trying to do a hard pitch, but we're just trying to grind it out. And now look at you, you're one of the recommended hosts by the WordPress.org, and that's pretty awesome. And one thing that I wanted to ask you is, as you've grown and you've scaled up this company, what do you guys look for when you're hiring people, and what are the challenges that you've faced in scaling up your company and growing?
Yeah, so I have this sort of philosophy around company building that sort of, it starts with the people, right? Like that you get the right people on board, you build a culture around building great products and about treating people well, and then you sort of you get enough the right people on the bus, and you just sort of let them take you where we go, so to speak. Like, I don't have all the answers, and so we put a really great emphasis on finding exceptional people. And do that pretty intentionally. And a lot of our interview processes, a lot of our the ways that we attract folks are built pretty deliberately towards that end. And ultimately, like, the best people want to work with the best people, and that's the other piece of it, right? And so once you get some traction in that regard, then you find yourself able to attract other remarkable folks. We look for a handful of things. Different things in different, job categories, obviously, but the things that I always say across all people that apply and ultimately end up at Flywheel are a few key attributes. One is, are they passionate about something, right? Like, lots of people are not really passionate about anything, and you want people that are passionate about their craft, whether it's software engineering or accounting or whatever it might be. Number 2, we look for impressiveness. This is my made-up word, that you meet with them and you have a conversation, and then you walk away and you're just like, holy shit, that person was impressive. Right? Like, it's hard to put into words what that is, but we all know it when you see it. When you have just an amazing conversation with somebody, you walk away and you're just like, they have to be at Flywheel. We look just for good humans. There's, kind of the proverbial no assholes at Flywheel sort of thing. Part of that's because I don't want to work with them, and part of that is because a big part of what we do is provide exceptional service to our clients, and we can't do that if we're filled with a bunch of people who aren't just good human beings. And I think so we look at things at that level of characteristics across all Flywheelers, and then obviously in different categories look for specific technical expertise or other things. And scaling is the better the people, the easier it is to scale. Things within the culture of Flywheel are hard to scale. So what works at 15 people doesn't work at 50 and doesn't work at 100. And so we're constantly evolving that. But I always describe the challenges related to growing the company as just one of many hard problems that we solve. So I think maybe one of the things that sets Flywheel apart from from other companies in the world, whether they're hosting or not, is kind of a willingness to solve hard problems. And so that's certainly the case in engineering, right? We solve hard infrastructure and technical problems. But it's also the case with regards to building the company as a product, right? With building the culture and with scaling the culture. People always ask you, like, it looks like you've got a great culture. How do you maintain that as you grow? And you say, like, well, it's hard, but we're committed to doing it. And we know that that's a hard problem. It's just one of many that we solve along the path. And so that's kind of how we think about those sorts of things. There's lots of sort of bumps and stumbling blocks and specifics, obviously, but overall, we've had good success, and we've got a great team, and we've been on we're at the very early edge of a long journey.
One last question before we head to our break, and I wanted to ask something that you were saying there. It kind of sparked something in my mind. And as you're growing, you said that what gets you to, level 1 isn't going to get you to level 2, and things change as the scale changes. Are there people that helped you that you reached out to for business advice, or people who mentored you, saying, like, these are the challenges that you're going to face? And if so, like, what kind of help did that provide you in having foresight as your company grew?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that there've been a number of great sort of there's been a lot of sort of mentors for us along the way, not in any sort of formal capacity, but more just friends of ours who run companies that are maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead of where we are. And you pointed a big company. They were our size at some point, but that oftentimes was a long time ago and in a different era. And so there's countless examples of folks who have helped us along the way who are maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead, where it was a year or 2 ago that they were our size, and they can remember it, right? They're like, oh yeah, I remember when we passed 50 people and we had to put in place management for the first time. Here's some ideas around that. And sure enough, we passed 50 people and we had to put in management and things like that. And so I think the more that one can get surrounded with peers who have been there in their shoes, but not 20 years ago, not 10 years ago, maybe 1 year ago, I think that's super valuable. It's harder in places like Omaha because there aren't, while there is a burgeoning tech scene, as you mentioned, there's not hundreds of examples of this around here. And so we've had to extend our network beyond Omaha for that in lots of ways. But certainly there's great examples here as well. And so we've built on the backs of some people who have done it before, and that's been super helpful.
Excellent. With that, we're going to go to our midway break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking more with Flywheel CEO Dusty Davidson about growing a hosting company, acquisition of local, and much more. See you after the break. We're coming back from the break, and now I'm passing the mic over to Jonathan Denwood.
Oh, thanks, John. Dusty. So another part is Silicon Prairie News. You're one of the founders of that. Why you got involved in that, and give us some background about that site?
Yeah, sure. So Silicon Prairie News is started as a blog really highlighting tech and startup companies in the Midwest of the US here. And it really was born out of this idea that when I started my first company, where I met my now co-founders of Flywheel, we wanted to find more people like us, right? And I grew up in this area and was a tech guy myself, and I was hell-bent on going to Silicon Valley because that's where cool companies are. Ended up, I would say, met a girl and ended up staying, but knew that there was more to be had here, right? There were companies and entrepreneurs and creative folks under the kind of flying under the radar that nobody knew about. And so the blog served as an opportunity to kind of highlight and coalesce those folks and really build a community in the Silicon Prairie of people who care about tech and creative endeavors. And so grew that as a company. We ran a number of conferences, Big Omaha being the largest. It was a big sort of tech company or tech conference here in the Midwest for now over 9 or 10 years, and met lots of great folks. And I think really were able to kind of help spearhead what has become a pretty neat little tech ecosystem, startup ecosystem here on the Silicon Prairie, as we call it. And so it's been a cool ride. We sold that company, Silicon Prairie News, 2 or 3 years ago, so that I could focus on Flywheel and sort of pass the reins on to an organization that could shepherd it for decades to come. And so we're excited, obviously, about that. And but that was kind of our little mark on the middle of the country.
No, because I know you had a series of interviews, you and your 2 co-founders on there, didn't you, recently, haven't you?
Yeah, we did. So the group that sort of is carrying on the Silicon Prairie News banner is doing a fine job of highlighting, local success stories, and whether they're small or medium or large. And Flywheel was fortunate to kind of be highlighted by them a couple of weeks back, a month or so. And they came over and did a tour of our office and a bunch of stuff. And so it was kind of fun. And, it's my position, my partner's position in this ecosystem is fun because at the time that we started Silicon Prairie News, there wasn't a lot of activity, and we weren't, our company was very small, and we were covering companies that were growing very quickly. And now you fast forward some time, and Flywheel is really one of the leading companies in terms of growth and impact certainly in the startup and tech space around here. And so it's fun to kind of be on the other side in a way, and frankly, be on the other side of the microphone, which is great.
Well, it does seem a trend, doesn't it? Because, with the founder of WP Engine, he is based in Texas. He's a joint founder of a startup center, isn't he?
Yeah, Capital Factory, sure.
Yeah, that's right. So there does seem to be a slight trend of people starting their own companies, but then they try and be part of a culture in their area, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, well, and I know Jason, and I think he has this, we have similar philosophies around startups in a lot of those regards. And, for us, it was, it's more interesting. It's frankly more fun to build companies around other people who are building companies. I think it makes the company better, right? You can learn from others. You can share what you've learned with others. And so in a sense, if you can, you can build a company anywhere. You can build a company in the middle of nowhere, as long as you can find you can have remote people. But my theory, in my opinion, is it's more fun to do that as part of a community. And I think more, not only just more fun, I think it's more impactful, and it creates better overall success. And so there's a lot of similarities there, certainly with what they're doing in Texas, or I think trying to get off the ground here in Nebraska. But for me, it's just, it goes back to the original theory, which was we just wanted to find more people like us. So
yeah. Before I say this, if I make a total mess here, please forgive me. I am British, so my American geography can be suspect. The 1 million cups, Kansas City, is that around your area?
Yeah, so Kansas City is 2.5 hours south of here. So both kind of like right smack in the middle of the U.S. And Kansas City is a little bit larger city and a different kind of startup community, but yeah, that's not that far from here.
So that whole I forgot the foundation that actually funds that, but do you think that's had any kind of real positive effect, that 1 million cups kind of movement?
Yeah, so 1 million cups is a weekly gathering on, I think, where the sort of theory being that if startup people drink 1 million cups of coffee together, then they strengthen their communities. I was started out of the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City, which is the world's largest foundation based on focused on entrepreneurship, and I think it does. Like, these are the types of activities that I think are really impactful for a community. And while one Wednesday morning meetup with coffee isn't going to create entrepreneurs necessarily, I think it's amongst other activities and events and incubators or accelerators, and it's called an ecosystem for a reason, right? There's lots of components to it, and it's not just one thing. So I personally think that 1 Million Cups and things like it, these opportunities to create serendipitous connections between people who are like-minded, I think they're great. And I think they are major contributors to the growth of kind of nascent startup communities around the world. The challenge, of course, is that as your company gets larger, it's actually harder to go to those things. So I don't find myself there that often anymore, even though in the very beginning days I was there every week. We just have too much going on. I've got a family and all these things, but I think that's okay, and I think it's healthy. So
yeah, I just want to mention it. So are you a bootstrap company, or have you taken VC investment?
Yeah, Flywheel's raised venture capital dollars in 2 rounds. We did a seed round in 2014, and we raised kind of a Series A round of venture capital dollars in April of last year.
Oh, that's fantastic. So as an experience, what's that been like, actually getting VC money?
It's both painful and exhilarating, I guess. I don't know. We've been fortunate to have really great partners in the folks that have invested in Flywheel, and I think that's a critical part of any sort of investor relationship. You hope that they are big supporters, and that they believe in you, and that they are sort of lockstep in what your vision is. We also were fortunate to not ever have to really need money, in a sense. We could have bootstrapped. We just would have grown more slowly. And so, in that regard, the money becomes a tool to be able to not only grow more quickly, but focus on the things that we want to focus on. So, I talked earlier about wanting to build products and workflow tools for designers. The venture capital dollars allow us to focus on that in addition to growth of just the pure hosting product. And so it's been great. And like I said, we've got great partners, and it's, venture capital dollars, like any money or like lots of things in business, it's a tool in a sense. It's not, it's not success, but if you can use it and leverage those dollars to create bigger impact, I think, like in our case, it's been a very positive thing for us.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. As long as the investors on the same mind map, or they understand the journey that they're going with you and the same outcomes. The thing was just escaped me, but basically there seems to be a trend, with GoDaddy buying managed WP, buying WP Curve, other hosting providers entering the market. There seems to be where a trend with hosting companies where they're going to add additional services like maintenance, or like other software tools. And you did that recently with the purchase. My mind, I've got to that age, Dusty, where it all goes out. You bought a tool which I've been using, which is fantastic for desktop development. What made you decide to buy that tool and put your company behind it?
Yeah, so at the end of last year, Flywheel acquired a company called Pressmatic, which was a relatively new local WordPress development app, and we rebranded it as Local by Flywheel, and we made it available for free. That solution was something that my partners and I had wanted to build since the very beginning of Flywheel. Because if you ask 10 different developers or designers how they build WordPress websites, you'll get 10 different answers. And some of them just log into the SFTP and just edit files directly. Some of them actually physically install a web server on their local machine. Some of them use MAMP, some of them use desktop server. But the majority of them just kind of like hack it in a way. And I think that there wasn't kind of like in hosting, there there's kind of a status quo there, and you can, our theory is you can come in with an exceptional product and really define what a proper and beautiful workflow looks like. So we wanted to build that since the very beginning. We were focused on building the core platform for several years, so we never had the time. And then we actually started down a path of building the product last summer, and got introduced to Clay, who ran Pressmatic, and he had built what is essentially exactly what we were wanting to build. It was a modern local development tool. It's built on container technology. It's built to be cross-platform. All these sorts of things, which was exactly what we wanted to do. And it was at that point a pretty simple equation on, do we buy it or do we spend the next 6 months building it? And we got that deal done quickly. And now Clay's part of the team, which is awesome. And that's been a really great addition, and I think really cements our mindset around building tools for that enhance the workflow of people who build sites on WordPress. And I think we'll continue to do those types of things. I would say that a robust kind of like secure, performant hosting platform is the minimum. Is like, of course we have that, and then the value and the sort of the icing on the cake is everything that we can do on top of that, and local is a perfect example of that.
With Sucuri being bought, obviously they had some third-party agreements, I think with SiteGround, and I'm not totally sure if I'm incorrect. I apologise to the audience, but I also think with WP Engine they had a contract. Was you surprised that when the news came out they had been bought? And what have you got any plans for your company, maybe to security products, anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm not surprised at all. Sucuri is a great company. I think that they were. I think it's a great acquisition by GoDaddy. I know Tony and the guys over at Sucuri really well, and we've partnered with them over the years. And so, I don't know what the future looks like there. They continue to have an exceptional product, and I think that's a big part of certainly why they were acquired, but also means that they kind of stand out in the industry as like the leader in that regard. So I don't know what that looks like for them going forward. For us, security continues to be one of the key components of the core offering that we provide. In terms of like, if you were to look at why, if I'm a designer and I have clients that are hosted somewhere, the last thing I want them to have happen to my clients is for their sites to get hacked, and kind of like Russian pornography shows up on the homepage of some like legal, like some lawyer website, right? And that's a major problem that needs like real effort and real engineering and real solutions. And we certainly have a lot of our own stuff. Whether that means it's a product on our side, I don't know, but certainly a major commitment on our part to our customers to provide that. And whether that's to continue to partner with Sucuri in some regards, or whether it's working with other partners, or whether it's doing it ourselves, we're working through the details on that. But regardless, it's a cool acquisition by GoDaddy, certainly. I think as are the other acquisitions they've made. I think I continue to be impressed with what they're doing in the space and the way that they think about hosting. I think it's actually similar to how we think about it, which is it is products that improve the lives of people, and so to that extent, they've done well.
Impressive answer, thank you, Dusty. As a general thing, how do you see? Obviously, one of the big drivers of WordPress has been third-party plugins, free ones, and also the premium market. I think it's been one of the biggest drivers for the growth in WordPress. How do you see in the next year, 18 months, the future of plugin developers? Do you think the future's bright, or do you think it's going to become a bit more difficult?
I think that I think the future is bright. Absolutely. I think the bigger the platform gets, the more that the bigger the ability for independent developers to build things and ultimately create a living on them, whether it's through premium plugins or through service or whatever it might be. And I think that in general is good for the ecosystem, because the more people that can make a living and that can sustain themselves on WordPress itself, I think just sort of compounds into the strength of the community. What I will say is that the plugin sort of world is big and complex and in many cases ugly. And so I think if I was to list off the areas of improvement around plugins and the plugin ecosystem, it is things like how updates are handled, how security is handled, how one separates the noise from where are the quality plugins, so to speak, from sort of ones that haven't been updated or won't be updated, and you'll start to see these leveling off in a way. And I do think there's also, I think there's a real world in which you start to see consolidation amongst things, because, and you already see this, I think the folks over at Backup Buddy have done a nice job of this, of kind of like bringing together a bunch of products under the same umbrella. You see this in other categories as well. And I think you're going to start to see some of that as well. But that's all good, because I think that helps focus on quality plugins and quality across the plugin ecosystem. And so, yeah, it's something we deal with a lot. I mean, we see every plugin under the sun. We see every plugin that causes problems, whether it gets hacked or it's performance related, these sorts of things. And so I think you'll see some settling out with regards to just overall quality across the board. While at the same time just being like the openness and the availability of people to contribute, I think ultimately, like you said, is what has driven the success of WordPress in a lot of ways. And so, we certainly don't want to see that go anywhere. But you'll see kind of a maturing of the plugin ecosystem in the years to come.
It's quite interesting in a way, because I agree in a way, but another way, it seems to be going that direction with some, like you pointed out, iThemes. I totally agree with you. They've done an excellent job. But then, like the forms, it used to be dominated by Gravity Forms, but increasingly you're seeing a number of players entering the form plugin market as an example, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's really interesting that one of the things that's fascinating to me is when plugins emerge that are free, that are exceptional, right? Like, so I can understand why a premium plugin can be great because they have the money to sustain it, but inevitably in lots of categories that happens, and then somebody comes in and at a time when maybe the free offerings are kind of like not good, somebody comes in with a free offering that's just great, and that drives it's got this weird effect on price and like the commoditization of great plugins and things like that. And so, yeah, you see this kind of this weird world where, yeah, like in the form space is exactly right, where there maybe used to be one player and now there's a bunch that do well, that are great. But it's a big market. I always say this about hosting. People are always like, how are you going to compete against these huge companies that provide hosting? I'm like, because WordPress powers so many websites, it's just a massive market, and that's not something to be to take lightly. And big companies can be built on the back of WordPress, where there are big companies that do exactly the same thing. And I think that's kind of the bigger WordPress gets, the more that kind of stuff's going to happen. So
the other thing is, Pippin Williams wrote an excellent piece. Time goes so quick, doesn't it, Dusty? I think it was over a month ago, about his own company, and I really respect him as a business owner and as a developer. He's been on the show. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
But he was saying that he was having to increase the prices of his plugins and some of the third-party plugins for his main product, which is digital download. Do you think that's also something that's going to happen? You know, prices around plugins, themes are going to go up.
I frankly would love to see it. I mean, we live in a world where the prices have historically been driven to the bottom in terms of hosting, right? And we sort of enter the market and say, hey, we're going to actually charge more. And it's kind of back to this old adage where we would charge somebody for the design and development of a site tens of thousands of dollars, and then the expectation of hosting was that you pay $2 a month. I would say the same goes for plugins, and that, you know, what you find is you have people who run their businesses and their livelihoods based on these websites. They're making tens of thousands of dollars of revenue in lots of cases, but are unwilling to pay for plugins. And I think, well, that's fine. And there, again, in open source, there will always kind of be this weird equilibrium with regards to price. I think generally, I believe that people are willing to pay for quality products, and across the board, oftentimes will pay more for quality than what they're paying now. And you see that in hosting, and you've seen that trend. And I've talked about this for a long time, where it was a race to the bottom for a long time. And I actually think it's kind of like not in a sense a race to the top, so to speak, because people just want it to work. And I would say the same thing applies to plugins, is that you know, people are willing to pay for quality, or a certain segment of people are willing to pay for quality. But it's such a big market that there's lots of people who maybe aren't willing to pay for it, but that's fine. Like there's free offerings, there's other things. And I hope that the effect of that is that prices do go up. And I think that's better for everybody, in my opinion.
I think that's really well put. But do you actually, to kind of finish off, and we really do appreciate the time that you spent with us, is, you know, Matt at the last WordCamp USA, you know, put forward very aggressive growth pointers, you know, where do you think in any shape, do you see the growth still increasing over the next year, 2 years, as the kind of growth we've seen over the past 2 years?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm bullish on, obviously, WordPress. We've got major investments into it, so to speak. But the way I look at it is that if you look at the numbers, it's something like 60% of the internet doesn't use content management at all. And so it's less in a way about the competition. It's less about Squarespace and Wix and these sorts of things, in my opinion. And it's more about this big swath of sites that don't have content management at all. Plus the overall internet is growing. So I would say the piece of the pie is growing and the pie is growing. And I think both of those things together, added together, create a world where it does, where the growth rate does maintain. And I think the thing about communities that's really powerful is that they kind of compound, right? They, especially open communities, right? Open source and rich sort of communities like WordPress is, that have meetups and WordCamps around the world. I think it compounds on itself, right? And I think that will drive further growth, in addition to just this concept that, you know, like I said, the piece of the pie is growing certainly as people adopt WordPress, but the overall pie is big, and you know, it doesn't seem to me to be any signs that the rate of growth of the internet is slowing down. And so, you know, all of those are reasons for us to certainly be bullish, and I think other people in the ecosystem should be bullish on the growth of WordPress as well.
Oh, thanks, Dusty. I think we're in this now. John, what do you think?
Definitely, I think this has been an exceptional episode. I think our viewers have learned a ton. I encourage them to check it out. And Dusty, where can we find you? And is there anything that you want to promote?
No, yeah, that's great. So I'm pretty easy to find. Just Dusty D on Twitter maybe is the best way. Or if there's any questions, I'm super responsive to email, dusty@getflywheel.com. Or if you're interested in Flywheel, You can check us out at getflywheel.com. Anything to promote? I don't know. I'm a bad promoter. I would say that local is the thing that we're pushing pretty hard. And so if you're struggling with local development, or if you have an interest in that at all, you can check that out at local.getflywheel.com. It's a free download for Windows and Mac, and we're going to be making a ton of cool enhancements over the coming months to it. So definitely check that out.
Jonathan, anything you want to promote, and where can we find you?
Oh, it's quite easy, folks. You can find me on Twitter at Jonathan Denwood. I think I am the only Jonathan Denwood on Twitter. Or you can email me. I do reply like Dusty to email. Can't do it the same day, but I will get back to you. It's only a common courtesy when another human emails you. As long as it's a question, intelligible one. And that's at Jonathan at WP-Tonic.com, John.
Excellent. And you can find me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com. And you can follow me on Twitter, lockdown_. For the WP posse, in effect, we're saying peace out and get your dose.